children have under the new covenant. There's a lot of fumes in there that we could burn for months in service for Him. My notes are double-sided because we ran out of paper, so I had to take my children's drawings. And now I have one side a message, and the other side is my children's artwork. So hopefully it will not be a distraction. Now I just made it a point of distraction, right? Thank you very much for your prayers. I covet your prayers. There's a verse I'd like to read it for the opening, verse 4, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 11 says, if any man speak, which I am currently doing, it says, let him speak as the oracles of God. That verse is a very challenging verse, and that's why I covet your prayers. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. The Low German Bible says that there's Gott im Wort reden, where he's supposed to speak as if God himself is speaking. And so there's a tremendous responsibility in that when a minister speaks, or any man, it says here, we have to speak the way God would speak. And so that's why I covet your prayers, and I thank you for the prayers that you have prayed for me. And my prayer is that God would speak today and not I. And another thing I'd like to be upfront with is this message that I have titled, The Effects of Technology on Relationships, is a message that I'm very much in need of. It's not a message that I preach to other people because I feel that the need is there. It's a message that I feel I need and have needed in my past and continue to need, and a message that I know we all need. So I've titled it, The Effects of Technology on Relationships. It affects all of us, but it affects us differently. Just like pain tolerances. Some of us can have pain, and we keep on going, but we have it. Some of us have a little bit of pain, and they shut down. And so technology affects us differently, but it affects us all. And we want to talk about specifically digital technology. The definition of technology is just an application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in industry. So what technology really is applying knowledge that you get from studying, observing things, and then making it useful for human resources, especially in industry. For example, a steam engine, way back in the day in 1698, there were miners working in the mines, and there was water in the mines, and it was a huge nuisance to them. It was in the way. They wanted to get to the gold, and water was in the way. So somebody had a brilliant idea and made the observation that steam has power. So to illustrate this, if you would take a 200-drum barrel, a metal one, and put a quarter full of water and put an element underneath and heat the water, you would start to get steam on top. Once there is steam, if you would screw that lid shut completely and put cold water on the outside, it would start to condense, and it creates a vacuum. And it creates a vacuum strong enough that the whole barrel, the 200-liter drum, will crush, and like a pop can. Just from the vacuum pressure, from steam to a cooling down. And somebody made that observation, they're like, hey, look, these miners are having issues underground. Why don't we create this cylinder that will heat water in, and we'll create steam, then we'll cool it off, and then we'll vacuum the water out of the ground. It was not very efficient, but nonetheless, it worked. That's technology. And from there, we've gone to steam engines, and to cars, and to planes, and to motorcycles. Like, now we have lots of technology already, and we have advanced, but it has always been around for many, many years. And then in the 1960s is when the digital technology revolution took place. So in 1945, that's 80 years ago, almost 81, we're 2025, so 80 years ago, they made the first computer. That computer was in a room. It occupied the space of a 50 by 30 feet square room. Our building here is 60 feet wide. So if we would say down the middle is 30, and 50 is probably from this wall roughly to the nursery, maybe to that sanctuary wall there. That's the space that one computer took up in 1945. That was the first computer. A massive machine. It had over 17,000 vacuum tubes. It had 70,000 recessitors, 10,000 capacitors, and over 6,000 switches. A very, very complicated machine, and it was very hard to swap programs, but nonetheless, that was the first computer. We have come a long ways since then. And so it continued to develop. It did not take very long that they started advancing and making progress. And so digital technology, just a brief intro here. We're talking about digital technology. Digital technology is a technology that has everything at the base of everything is ones and zeros. Everything, if you would wire down your phone or you get to the nitty-gritty bottom space of it, everything is saved and functions on zeros and ones. That's digital. That's why it's called digit. There's digits, and the only digits they use is ones and zeros. And combinations of this makes different information. And so that's why it's called digital technology. That's just a side note there. When the internet started coming out, which was in 1969, the network was started by the military. So a network is an interaction between two computers. First, they had a computer. Then a network is the connection with another computer. And then another one, they create a network. They had worked on it before, but this is when it started to grow, and these people started interacting with it. And then in 1983, then they created the internet. The word inter means coming in between. You know, you have, if you interrupt me, you're coming in between a conversation. If you have a conversation between two people and somebody interrupts, they come in between. So the word internet means connecting or getting in between the network. So there was an existing group of people. They had a network. It was a very few, but then they created a system where people could they created the internet where you could connect into their network. Then all of a sudden, you had access to their information. What they had on their computer, you could access. What you have on your computer, they could access. That's what the word internet means. You're able to connect to somebody else's network, and they're able to connect to your network. At the beginning, it was very, very slow. It was 14.4 kilobytes. A lot of us don't know how small that really is. But one of our normal cell phones takes a picture, and it uses 3.5 megabytes. That is just a typical smartphone, you know, an iPhone 16, Samsung Galaxy 23, 22, whatever. Roughly, in general. Roman's a photographer. He would probably know the exact, their camera I think is quite a bit higher than that. Can be. Now, I tested our internet speed at home the other day, and I got 350 megabytes download. Back then it was 14 kilobytes. To download one picture, when they created the network, the internet, it would take 32 minutes to download one picture. Okay, so if you got a WhatsApp message at the beginning of the internet, and I had sent you a picture from my phone now, you would have to sit there for 32 minutes to download one picture. Okay, you see, it was really, really slow. And so people, it was constrained or confined to just texts or letters because it took up way less space, way less bytes, and bytes, way less digits. There was way less digits to make one information. It takes one byte to make one letter H. So one byte is one letter. And kilobytes is 14,000 bytes, is what the speed was then at the time. Now you can download your 3.5 megabyte picture. I could download 100 of them in a second. 350 a second. Or it'd just be 100, right? It'd be 100 of them, not 350. It would take 1 second, because you move the decimal over 2 times. It takes 1 second with our internet to download 100 pictures. And it's in your pocket. So they have sped it up like crazy. And that's what technology does. It speeds things up. It makes it a lot more rapid. That's 24,000 times faster than when it started. 24,000 times faster. And then the World Wide Web, the www. Came onto the scene, which is 1989. And that was created by some young college students. And then in 1998, Google showed up. So what Google is, as an example, when you go to General Metal is not the right word, J.R. Berry, there we go, that's a parts store. When you go to J.R. Berry, you go and you talk to the counter and you tell them, hey, look, I would like to get a belt. Not like a belt put on your waist, but a motor belt. Then the guy will say, okay, we have lots of belts. We have from every size, shape, and color you want. Then you tell him, well, I want a lawnmower belt. Okay, well, that would put it down maybe to 10. Then if you tell him, I want a John Deere belt, then it would maybe narrow it down to 2 belts. And so the man behind the counter knows what he has in the back. And then you tell him what you want, and he goes and gets it. Google is a search engine for information in the warehouse. Okay, it's not the information itself. And all the information that's on the internet, the web, the World Wide Web, is all stored physically, literally, somewhere in the US. The internet does not exist in space. The information is actually in a location in massive buildings. There's this information. And then you Google something, and that motor, that warehouse dude, runs into there, and it pulls up information in this place and brings it to your phone and tells you these are the options you have. That makes sense? That's what Google is. It's a search engine for piles and piles and piles of information. And that's why if you have, for instance, iCloud, you rent a space for iCloud, and if you wreck your phone, all your photos are still saved because it's actually stored on a hard drive somewhere in the US. It's saved there. And then when you access it through the internet, you can trail back and you can enter that portfolio, your rented space, and then you can access your information. If you don't rent that, your phone gets full. Then if your phone breaks, you've lost everything. Does that make sense? The internet is a place of an enormous amount of information stored in a physical place in the US through digits, and Google is allowing you to enter that information. Some of it's private, it's locked by government officials. There's no way you can enter it, or that's why hackers exist, to access private information. But if you rent a storage, it's like saying, you know what, you don't have enough storage, you don't want to carry this big bulky phone around that has 4 terabytes of data. You can just rent the place from us. We'll give you your storage here, we'll protect it for you. But know that if you're on the internet, somebody can always connect to it. It's just like keys. If people want to unlock something, there's a way. This gives us a little bit of an idea of what digital technology is. Today, and I experienced it just a while ago, today you can order your food through digital information. You're contacting somebody, they tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else to come and deliver the food to your doorstep. You can pay without seeing anybody. They'll take information from your bank account, transfer it to that person's account, all with digital media. I bought a camper 3 weeks ago. I paid for it. I didn't see it. I didn't see the salesman. I didn't see the guy who dropped it off. I paid him as well, and it was just on my yard. He delivered it at 11 in the evening in the night. He sent me a picture of it. He left. I transferred him an e-transfer, and it's done. I didn't interact with anybody. It was all through digital media. You can share what you've experienced with your family when you're all by yourself on the couch. You can get new friends without meeting anybody. On your couch, you can add new friends to your list, and you can tour the world, see the pyramids, and, watch Planet Earth. Our children have watched much of Planet Earth, and you can see these whales and dolphins, and you can see things you would never get to experience on your couch because of digital technology. You can watch wars in Ukraine or in Israel. People find each other for marriage over digital technology. And in fact, this literally has happened and is happening. People are getting married over digital media. Legally, in the US, they're having weddings, and 2 people are connecting that person there, and through the web, there's Zoom calling, video callings, and they're getting official marriage documents through digital media. Okay, this is facts. This happens. We would be foolish to think that digital technology is not impacting us. It is everywhere. It is in your vehicles, it's in your homes, it's when you go shopping, it's available, readily available everywhere. The question is, how is it affecting us? Do we have any idea what it is doing to us as human beings? And so we want to spend some time looking at how this is affecting us and how God sees it. And this is where my prayer is, that God would speak. This is a topic that I don't want to be opinionated, and I want God's ways to come through. And let's look at a parable passage in 2 Samuel. There's a passage that I would like to use that I think is applicable to our current situation. And please note, I am not here to dump on technology or digital technology and say it's all bad. I want us to realize how is it affecting us. 2 Samuel chapter 6. I think I'll just read the verses over till verse 9, verse 8. Tweede Samuel, kapitel 6, vers 1 tot daar 8. And again, David gathered to gather together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. David arose and went with all the people that were with him from Baalah of Judah to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, that dwelleth between the cherubims. And they set the ark of God upon a new cart, and brought out of the house Abinadab that was in Gibeah, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drave the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was at Gibeah. Accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps and on psalteries and on timbrels and on cornets and on cymbals. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error. And there he died by the ark of God. And David was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. That was a poor pronunciation of that place. In this story, we see the people of Israel. They are gathered together, and it was a time of revival. The Ark of the Covenant had been neglected, had been taken by the Philistines, and the Philistines had sent it back, and it was left to a village, and it should have been in Jerusalem, it should have been in the tabernacle, it should have been amongst its people, but it was kind of neglected in a village that was a little more unknown, and had been moved once because some of the Israelites had peeked into there when they shouldn't have, and 53,000 people died. And then the people were like, you know what, we don't want this. Who's going to take care of this ark? And then Abinadab and his sons, they were sanctified and purified, and it was brought into their village. But the people were excited. It was a long overdue task. 40 years the ark was gone. And finally, the moment has come. We're going to bring the Ark of the Covenant home. And they make a big event out of this. And the people are preparing for it. And they put it on a new cart. It says it's a new cart. So David probably designed it. We do not know for sure. But there's a good chance David and his men put a lot of effort into designing a beautiful cart and bringing this Ark of the Covenant home. And the idea is that one of the sons of Abinadab is going to drive it, Ahio is going to drive it, and the other one walks before. So they have made this big cart. There's going to be a driver, 2 oxen, and one son will walk and one son will drive, and they'll bring this ark home. As they're traveling, the people are praising God, and everybody's excited. And they're thinking, like, this is revival. This is what they all wanted, and these are chosen men. The cart starts to rock by a certain location, and it starts to tip, and the Ark of the Covenant is going to fall off. And like any man would do, is we reach out to stop it. That is our reflex. It was probably out of good intention, or I'm sure it was out of good intention, that he wanted to stop it And as it's falling, as the man touches it, God strikes him dead on the spot. And I am sure all the singing stopped right then. And the question is why? Like, why, of all things, in such a positive environment, in such a worship service, does God strike a man on the spot? It has to do with a proper understanding of what the Ark of the Covenant represented. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time and look what the Ark of the Covenant is and God's importance of it and why it was so important. One thing was in Exodus chapter 14. You can turn there. That's Drare Mose kapitel 5. Numbers chapter 4. Sorry, not Exodus. Numbers chapter 4, verse 15. Så det would Drare Mose kapitel 5, vers 15 sein. Actually, it's 4 Mose, right? I'm on my Everton. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. So it's 4 Mose. Verse 15. There they were told how the ark was supposed to be transported. Okay? It says, and when Aaron and his sons have made an end of covering the sanctuary and all the vessels of the sanctuary as the camp is set forward, after that the sons of Kohath shall come to bear it. That is the Ark of the Covenant. But it says, but they shall not touch any holy thing lest they die. These things are the burden of the sons of Kohath in the tabernacle of the congregation. They were told in black and white letters, the Ark of the Covenant has to be covered by the priests in multiple layers. The worship stuff was put on the inside, and they covered it again and again till it was totally covered. And after it had been covered, then the sons of Kohath would come forward and they would stick a rod through where there was rings on the Ark of the Covenant, and in there were poles that were covered in gold, and it was supposed to be carried on their shoulders. They were told that, and then it says, and if anybody's going to touch it, you are going to die. When the children of Israel put the Ark of the Covenant onto the cart, they were doing so knowingly. They knew the rings, the rods, they were there all the time. They could tell when they look at the ark, this thing is designed to be carried, and God told them to carry it. The Ark of the Covenant now, it represents God's relationship with humanity. So we draw the tabernacle and we have the outer courts. They would set this up. They would package this all up and then they would carry it and then they would set it all up every time they stopped when they're wandering in the wilderness. This was the Holy of the Holies. The priests went there once a year. In the center, behind the curtain, this was a curtain that tore at Easter. This is where the Ark of the Covenant was set. The priest would come into here once a year and he would make atonement with blood. And God himself says in Exodus, he will come down. Maybe we should read that verse. He will come down, he says, and I will commune. I will talk to you and meet you by the Ark of the Covenant. It was God's presence amongst his people. It was the center, the heartbeat of their worship. You remove the Ark of the Covenant, Israel had no worship system. It was literally God amongst his people at the Ark of the Covenant. It was a covenant between him and the people. You, if you were a Jew at the time, could come and you could bring your ox over here. They would slaughter it. There's a big altar here. And the priest would take it from here. They would bring it into here. And they had the showbread and the candles. And there was a sacrifice that was done over here. That was your part. You stopped here. The priests continued to go through. And only the high priest could enter there once a year. But it was literally your relationship with God was dependent upon the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? And so what we see here is when the children of Israel put the Ark of the Covenant onto a cart, they were putting God, their relationship with God, onto a cart, which was meant to be carried upon their shoulders. And a cart was technology. It was an advancement. It was way easier to put the Ark of the Covenant onto a cart than to carry it. I'm convinced if you'd have asked the progressive technology group of the time and said, hey, should we put the Ark of the Covenant onto a cart or carry it? They would have said, well, look at the Philistines. They got away with it. It's so much easier. It's faster. Nobody's getting tired. It's more convenient. It's exactly what technology does. Makes things easier, faster, smoother. Less hassle, less sweat. You know, we can have more singers and less carriers. But they were putting God on a cart when they should have been carrying him. The Ark of the Covenant is not just a relationship of a picture of relationship with God. It's also a picture of relationship with man. So let me draw one more diagram here. If we have God here, we have man here. And in fact, and why I'm going to stress relationship more yet, the reason why Jesus died, there's one reason why he died. That was to restore a relationship. Okay, Jesus died to restore you and mine relationship with God again. That's what reconciliation means. That means bringing back into a relationship. That is why he died. The Ark of the Covenant had the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, the majority of them have to do with your relationship with your fellow man. Thou shalt not steal. That's a protection for a relationship. If I were to go steal from hand, it would break our relationship. Thou shalt not kill, that would break another relationship. Thou shalt not commit idolatry, that's breaking relationships. The 10 Commandments are protection for relationships. And if you'll read the New Testament, do you know how many chapters, and I don't know all the verses, but have you ever thought of how many verses and how many chapters they focus specifically on relationships with your fellow man? There is so many verses that talk specifically on managing relationships between two people, or 3 or 4 or 5. That is because God has a tremendous importance on relationships. Now, I think I won't read it for time's sake. I'm not going to read verses. I'll read one verse that kind of stresses this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 32. And I hope to tie it together at the end here. This is Paul speaking on relationships. He says, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 32, give none offense neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God, even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. There you have, in short summary, Paul's view in life. He would seek to create no offense. An offense, as we heard a while ago by Pastor Milton, is a breach in a relationship. It's pain, it's offense. Paul says he avoids it to the Jews, which were rigid, self-righteous, very legalistic. To the Gentiles, they were liberal, sensual, often going to all sorts of wacko ideas. And to the church of God, he says he seeks to avoid offense with all men. Those are all relationships. And then he says, and he seeks to profit them all. He focused on relationship. Now, I want to look at a few statistics that researchers have found and see if you will follow here. They have done studies, scientific studies by non-Christian researchers. They have done studies on the difference relationships makes on people. Did you know, men, we're going to talk to the men, that in the Gottman Institution in the U.S., they did a study. They counted how many contempted looks you made at your spouses. That means like frowns or like roll your eyes, or you give them an implication of what they did or what they said was not smart, it was kind of dumb. You were making a contempt look. If they counted how many of those looks you gave them in a certain time span, they could predict accurately how many health issues a spouse would have. Accurately. Can you fathom that? You can predict how healthy somebody else will be by how the husband's treating the wife. That is relationships, folks. They are way more impactful than what you and I often think. They had college students. They would put viruses cold flues into their system through nose swabs, and they kept track how these college students would interact. The ones that were by themselves and alone, they got sick way more than those that walked around, that interacted, that gave hugs. It did not matter if they were vaccinated or not vaccinated. What mattered was their relationships. They did a study to determine, they tried to figure out how long does a person live? What affects a person's health length in life? Now, this is where some of you could probably think that I'm going wacko, but we'll come to a Bible verse and I'll confirm it. They looked at oxygen. They looked at alcohol. They looked at smoking. They looked at exercise, obesity. What do you think determined which people lived longer and which died sooner of illness? The two main predictors, and that's a predictor that they used to estimate a person's lifespan, were, number one, their social relationships with other people, not their family or their marriage. The number one reason was the people that you integrate with socially, your church family, your workplaces, the people you meet at Walmart, the people you see on the road, where you interact with people. The number one indicator. The number two was your home family life. Those were the two main determining factors on how long you would live. And in fact, the studies say people would live 15 years longer that had healthy relationships. 15 years. Because of relationships. Now some of you are thinking, that's just scientific. You know what the Bible says? What's the first commandment with promise? Children, obey your parents in the Lord. And we're supposed to honor them, right? What does it say? And it's the first commandment with promise. What? That it may be well with you and you might live, what? A long life. Boom. I was walking in my living room. It connected. God did not say, make a promise just because he wanted to say something. He made us to live in relationships, and when our relationships are healthy, we have long lives. Literally. Like, relationships builds our immune system. When you have stress, and poor relationships causes piles of stress, you have cortisol drip into your system. Cortisol suppresses your immune system. It suppresses, it increases your blood pressure. It increases your sugar in the blood. Now, we should get further time to speak on this topic. But that literally happens. This is all on relationships. That is more important than genetics, more important if you're smoking, more important if you're drinking alcohol, more important what kind of air you're breathing. Relationships will determine your lifestyle more than those factors. I was almost mind-boggled when I thought of that. Now the question is, how does everything tie in technology? Now the question is, if relationships have this importance, Jesus died to restore them. And there is piles of verses that talk about how we're supposed to maintain them. The Ark of the Covenant was a representative of that. The Ten Commandments were a representative of that. The New Covenant was a symbol of that. How do you think digital technology is affecting it? That is the question. Once we understand the value of relationships, all of a sudden, I have a way better grasp of how to handle digital technology. Does that make sense? Once you understand what ought to be, then all of a sudden you can use this digital technology in a healthy way. So a relationship is maintained through micro interactions between two people. Okay? So if me and Albert go shake hands and we talk after church, that will either increase or decrease our relationship. If it's a positive experience, it's a minor experience, but it will either boost it up a little bit or it will boost it down a little bit. Every interaction you make with somebody will either improve it or decrease it. When you bring technology into this, if you want to have a positive experience, you have to be there mentally and you have to be there physically. If you take out a cell phone while you're interacting with somebody, you have automatically made that experience a negative one. Because you are now saying to that person you're interacting with that whoever or whatever's on your phone is more important than the person you're talking to. Nobody needs to say anything, and it will not break your relationship or shatter it to pieces, but it will just put it one level down. It influences the people. And in fact, studies have shown that if a cell phone is in sight in a conversation, people will just talk about the weather and shallow stuff. The reason is because they think they will be interrupted by a phone call. They make a subconscious connection to that, and that is liberal and conservative researchers agree on that. Did you know, moms, that babies that are like just 2 months old or a month old, that they notice if you look into their face or if you look onto a cell phone? Their emotional development at that young little stage while you're nursing them or caring for them is dependent upon eye contact, mother to child. It makes a difference in their hearts. They develop differently. I have seen children, and I've had them in my school years ago. There was a child that was just different. He was not handicapped in any way, but you sense something was underdeveloped because they did not have relationships. One writer said, one researcher said that children do not need pixels, even if their eyes on a screen and they're pictures of humans, those are not human eyes. They need human eyes to look into their eyes and to meet that. So my encouragement with this whole message, and I have left some information out due to time, but that is our children are not to be on carts. They're not supposed to be raised by technology. It is so easy. It is so easy for us as parents, and I struggle with this as much as anybody. You want to have an adult conversation. You know, the children are around and you'd like some space. And then you give them a screen. And they click on a screen and they're on digital media. And then all of a sudden, you just send them away. The children need us to play with them. They need us to cry with them, to show empathy for them. The click of a button creates often many problems. And our young people don't know how to have relationships anymore because they have parents that don't know how to have relationships with them. In fact, there was one teacher says it was the teenagers that were actually wanting the parents to put the phone down because the parents weren't interacting with them. It's not just the young people. It is the men that are my age that struggle with it, and myself included. It is easy to get distracted. And once you take out a cell phone, you start to degrade a relationship. They have their place. They're very beneficial in certain things, but they are not good for building one-on-one relationships with other people. Have you noticed that? You go to the superstore, you go to the bank, you go in the airport. Who is relating? When does somebody come up to you, hey, how are you doing? Just a complete stranger. Who is interacting? Almost nobody. At one point I was wondering, why is there so much sickness these days? I don't know if anybody else, I feel like many people are always ill. Cancer, this, and maybe there's obviously some food and some medicine, all these things. But I'm starting to wonder if it's because people do not know how to relate anymore. They're alone in their basements. They're walking with earbuds and screen. They don't know how to interact. And so their immune system just collapses. And so my encouragement to us is, let us seek to build healthy relationships with God and with men. When you walk into Superstore, greet the person in front of you. When I was on the plane, when we came back from our pastors' meeting in Edmonton, I was blessed by that experience. My fellow pastor, Stephen Barch, he stood up and he got his stuff and he talked to the other person and asked where he came from and what he was doing. And I was like, this is the positive experience. And it's so easy that I would have just grab my bag, stand in line, walk out the door, and, do my thing. The interaction there that happens, those are positive experiences that build your immune system that we can live long and have a healthy lifestyle. Obviously, there's other factors that influence some of that, but in general. Good, we will close there. I'd like to ask the congregation to stand, please, for prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you. I thank you, God, for your love. I thank you, Jesus, that you have died to restore a relationship with you, that we can commune with you, and that you're willing to commune with us. Lord, you have created us to be relational beings. And Father, you see, we live in a digital world where there's so much media, there's so much information, there's so much distraction. And Father, I pray that you would teach us anew how to have relationships with one another, Lord, that we could truly learn to interact, that we could truly build uplifting experiences, Father, as we interact with our church brothers and sisters, as we go about work, as we go about in town and in villages and in cities. Oh Lord, teach us to interact with other people. Teach us to reach out. Lord, you say that the two greatest commandments are to love you and to love each other, and we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. And Father, I pray that you would help us to do that, and that we could truly glorify you with that, and that we would not put relationships on a cart and expect it to get done by itself. But Lord, that we would take that responsibility upon our shoulders, and we would bear it with joy, and that we would learn to honor you with relationships, Lord. That's I pray in your name. Amen.